much ado, now we begin our second panel on social and political rights. And joining us are Ms. Mumtaz Mughal and Muhammad Wahid Iqbal Saab. Kate, over to you for your presentation.
Thank you so much. Can we reboot the slides? Or is it? While we wait to get the slides set up, I just want to thank the panelists for joining. And we were just having, over the tea break, a discussion about the programs that I'm going to talk about now. And both Ms. Mumtaz and Wahid Saab shared some really interesting perspectives, which I'm really excited to have them share with the group as well about things moving forward on these issues. Thank you so much. So I'm going to talk, again, for the same structure we're going to have as we had on the last panel. I'm going to talk for about 10 minutes about research that we've done in collaboration with implementing agencies, including the government of Punjab, on evaluations of two interventions that relate to the same basic issue, which is the gap between the legal rights written in the law on the books, and the legal rights that women have access to in practice, de facto legal rights. So the first study is a study that focuses on the issue of women's rights in marriage. So I think most of the audience are already familiar with some of the context here, but just to review that the nikah nama is a legally binding contract. It's not just a document that a woman signs at the time of the wedding ceremony, but it's a legally binding contract. And for many, if not most women, it might be the most important legal contract that they're ever going to sign. It affects their rights to divorce and their financial rights as well. But we'll just try to get everyone muted for their side discussions. Great. But most women are not informed about what it is that they are signing. So when we ask women in surveys, when we ask marriage registrars in surveys, they say that no, people are not telling the bride what it is that she's signing. She's just asked, here, sign this. And she signs up to whatever conditions are written into the contract, including these variable conditions that are specified that are going to affect her future rights. So in this project, the project focuses on the role of the marriage registrar, the nikah registrar. The registrar plays a really important role in this context. He can play, and I say he because all of them are men, 100%. At the moment, in the context of Punjab. So he can play a role in at least 3 important ways. The first is that typically the nikah registrar is also the nikah khwan, so he is, in most cases, both the religious leader, the imam who's carrying out the marriage ceremony, and also going on to register the marriage afterwards. So he often typically informs the parties, both the bride's family, the groom's family, about what should they fill in this contract. So again, when we ask registrars, the majority of them say that they either always or sometimes advise families. The family asks them, it asks here about haq meher, it asks about the financial rights of the bride, it asks about divorce. What are we supposed to write here, Maulvi Saab? So they give this kind of advice. The second component is that they might informally advise parties about what they should actually fill, or resolve disagreements between the two parties if there's a negotiation over what to fill in. So they can tell, here's what this provision means. They can tell, here's what you should write. And they can also say, no, I'm not going to officiate this marriage if you fill it in a certain way. So this could be good if they say, I'm not going to officiate a child marriage or a forced marriage. It could be bad if they say, I'm not going to officiate a marriage in which the woman gets the right to divorce. So it can go in either direction. And one way that we see that coming up is that, which I think probably most people in the room have some anecdote about, is that the nikah registrar often crosses out sections of the marriage contract before even handing it to the family to fill in. So the registrar is an important person in this decision, in all of these decisions about the contract. But most of them are not very educated or trained. Most registrars have a matric level of education or less, so 10th grade or less. And before the Government of Punjab, PCSW, and LGD program that I'm going to talk about today, 90% of them had never received any training about the law, even though they play a crucial role in carrying it out. When PCSW tested the registrars at the beginning of this project, the vast majority of them got what in many universities might be considered a failing grade on basic questions about the knowledge of the laws that they themselves are implementing. So they're very crucial in making these decisions, but they're not very informed about them. Many of these are not very educated individuals, and they're not necessarily religious scholars either, so a large proportion of them neither have formal education nor have madrasa training. It's a whole mix. So between 2017 and 2018, the Government of Punjab, PCSW, and the local government department conducted the first ever required large-scale training of marriage registrars. And we had the opportunity to work with them to do a partially randomized rollout to evaluate the impact of this program. The key findings of the evaluation, I think, suggest a lot of really positive impact. So the marriage registrar training dramatically increased registrar knowledge of the law. We got data on marriage contracts, so we have 14,000 marriage contracts that were digitized, and what we see is that there's a big drop in illegal practices in the contracts, like crossing out a provision that you don't agree with before you hand it to the family. In addition, we see that there's an increase in the proportion of women who say that I was asked about this or told something about this contract before I signed it. So an increase in something more like informed consent to the provisions of the contract. And we see that particularly for educated women. So some of the policy implications of the findings of this study, which I'm really excited to continue, we had started discussing some of this at the break. What's the potential way forward for this? So I didn't mention in this sort of abbreviated version of the slide deck how big this was, but we're talking about tens of thousands of registrars that were trained by PCSW. But as I showed you in this map, the rollout that happened so far in 2017 to 2018, for those of you, most of you would be able to see easily here that the top of Punjab is not covered. So not all parts of the province were covered, and there was a turnover from one financial year to the next, and as yet there haven't been funds allocated, as far as I understand, to train remaining sections of the province, or to do any refresher training or something of that sort. So a natural implication of this should be that there should be a continuation or regularization of this training as a requirement for the registrar license. So the license is issued by the government, and as of now, there's no training required to get the license. This sort of a training could become a requirement to get the license. I think these are particularly important policy implications for LGD because these registrars are ultimately, their licenses are issued by the local government and the local government department. Secondly, there's a huge space in terms of actually negotiating what goes into the contract. So it's just the first step to make sure that brides know what it is they're signing. The next question is there any scope for pushing for improved conditions in terms of what they're signing? So this project that PCSW carried out focused on the role of the marriage registrar. And they had also done some activities in this other space, which is to inform women about the content of the contract before they're engaged. I think that there's a lot of scope to experiment more with interventions like this. So for example, in higher education institutes or in other settings, I think Ms. Mumtaz was mentioning that Aurat Foundation has also done work in this space of just let women see what does the blank contract look like and talk to them about what's going to be in it before the wedding day, maybe even before they're engaged, early enough that they can start thinking about it and start that conversation before it becomes a really huge time pressure. Similarly, it seems that, so there's a really strong taboo that people have mentioned again and again against discussing the contract terms in advance. That's the case here in Pakistan. Many people have sort of repeated this to me, that it's not something people are comfortable to push for better conditions for their daughter, because they're worried that if we start saying, okay, we want better haq meher, we want right of divorce, then the groom's family will start to worry that, what does this mean? Are they thinking their daughter's actually very quarrelsome, difficult to get along with? Are they already worrying about divorce? Why is this coming up on the wedding day? Breaking this taboo is difficult, but I think it seems very possible, in part because in other settings, like Bangladesh, where there's similarly a marriage contract, it's very similar in many ways. It's very common to have an active negotiation over the content. People are not shy about it, and so it's possible for this to look a different way. What can we do to help break this taboo? Maybe one first, very initial step would be to encourage people to start to look at the contract further in advance. So again, don't fill it out on the spot on the day of the wedding when everybody's under time pressure and everything feels very high stakes. Start that conversation early. And so interventions with registrars and families could help to do this. I just want to mention that our team is interested in collaborating with implementers on piloting and evaluating these kinds of complementary interventions that could add to what the marriage registrar training has done. The second study I want to talk about engages with the issue of women's rights in inheritance. So, under the law of the land, women have the right to inherit property, and they have a fixed share of the inheritance that they're supposed to receive. So it's a legal requirement that daughters have to receive their share. But, as I think most, if not all of you know, it's very uncommon that they do. Female disinheritance is the norm. So of women whose fathers or husbands owned property and passed away between 2000 and 2010, only 22% reported that they inherited any of it. This is also from a survey that PCSW conducted in 2018. So here we're looking at the impact of a new system for agricultural land registration that the government of Punjab rolled out. Before the system, this is what land records management looked like. So there would be a big system of, in every Patwari circle, you'd have a book or a whole stack of maps and records. So when somebody passes away and the land is transferred to his heirs, the Patwari basically makes an update in the document, and it ends up looking quite messy, like this. Everything is managed by the Patwari, by this local official who's, again, exclusively male, and can collaborate with the sons in saying that, okay, well, we'll just divide the property between the sons. Ultimately, this person is a very powerful person in being able to make those kinds of decisions in the old system. In the new system, the land records were all digitized, and now in order to make a land inheritance mutation, the heirs have to go to one of these service centers, the Arazi service centers. There's one in every tehsil. I think that they may have been looking at expanding to more areas as well. So you can see immediately some of the differences here. One is that they all have female staff. They have a proper waiting area, and they have designated places for women to wait. They're supposed to be accessible for women to use. Perhaps more importantly, they also require that the heirs have to verify their identity using their thumb, using biometrics. So it should make it a lot more difficult for the brothers. Just in the old system, perhaps the brothers can just go to the Patwari and say, okay, let's sort this out. In the new system, if they come without their sister and say, you know, we want to go ahead and make the mutation, there could be difficulty. It's supposed to make it difficult for them to do that because the records will say, well, there's a sister. Where's the sister? Why is she not here? She's supposed to be appearing and showing her thumbprint, so it's harder to override. It's supposed to be harder to override that system. This new land records management system was not designed primarily as a gender intervention, and in fact, one of our co-authors, Sabrine Beg, has another study looking at this intervention and just showing that in general, it made land markets and agricultural markets work better and be more productive, which is good news. But it has this really important gender component. We study what happened as this new system rolls out at the sub-district level from 2011 to 2014. So, these are tehsil. So tehsil by tehsil, each area starts using this new system. And so what that means is that we can look at families where somebody passed away in this tehsil in 2010 versus 2012, before or after the new system started. And in this tehsil in 2011 and 2013, before and after the new system. So we can control for all these differences between different places and control for trends over time and just isolate what's the effect of this new land records management system on female inheritance. So what do we find? The first key finding is that these new centers had a major positive impact on female inheritance. So there's an increased probability of women inheriting and keeping agricultural land from their fathers. But there's also evidence of some unintended consequences from family responses. So women marry younger and they're less likely to consent to the marriage. And there's some evidence that we're finding of decreased investment in daughters' education. So why might that happen? Well, there can be a trade-off between dowry and education. If you have, suddenly there's a new rule that's making it such that your land is going to be divided between the daughters and the sons instead of just between the sons, as often happened before the reform. So now you might, as a parent, you might reallocate resources between children, and specifically, you might change how you're allocating resources towards the daughter's dowry. So there's a number of different things going on here. One is that the daughter immediately, potentially has a more valuable dowry inherently, in that she's going to inherit the land in the future. So then that means that you might want to spend less money today on her dowry. But there's also, from the perspective of the groom's family, a risk, because you don't know for sure when is that land going to come into your family, and is it definitely going to come or not. There's a lot of uncertainty among families at the time of the investment in education or at the time of marriage. And so they may be, because there's this uncertainty about future land inheritance, there may be this kind of unintended consequence. So one key policy implication of this is that we should think about further interventions that we could consider that would decrease the uncertainty in this whole system. So there's a new system which increases the probability that women inherit, but because it's so unknown up front, then it's hard then everyone is sort of unsure about making investments for future. If I invest a lot of money in the dowry today, maybe my daughter is still going to inherit a part of the land in the future, and that means less for my sons. So there's this trade-off that's harder under uncertainty. Great, so I'm very excited, I'll stop there, and I'm very excited to hear the comments of the panelists about both of these issues and about future policy and other interventions that can be considered towards them.
Thank you very much. We go to Samia first. So we go to Samia first. Okay. Thank you very much. Ms. Mumtaz, if I might ask you to comment on this.
Thank you very much, and many congratulations, Dr. Kate, for this important studies. Basically, जब हम इस पे मुझे याद है कि ये जो जब हमने फर्स्ट टाइम पहले जो ट्रेनिंग कराई निकाह खां की सरगोदा में अर्थ फाउंडेशन ने, तो उसमें हमने जब निकाह खां को बुलाया और उनको बताया कि आप ये निकाह फॉर्म फिल करना क्यों ज़रूरी है اور اس کی لیگل جو ہے کیا کیا ریکوائرمنٹس ہیں. تو مجھے یاد ہے کہ بہت سارے نکاح خواہ بیچارے ڈر کے نا 2-3 تو چلے ہی گئے تھے فوراً چائے کے پیتے ہی, کہ انہیں لگا کہ یہ تو قانونی باتیں بتا رہے ہیں اور ہم یہ کام تو کرتے ہی نہیں ہیں جو قانون کے مطابق ہمیں نکاح فارم کو فل کرنا ہوتا ہے. تو وہاں سے یہ چیز نکل کر آئی اور ہم نے اس کو شیئر کیا گورنمنٹ ڈپارٹمنٹس کے ساتھ. اور یہ وہ وقت تھا جب 2012 میں پنجاب کے اندر چیف منسٹر جو ہے شہباز شریف صاحب, انہوں نے جو ہے ایک وومن امپاورمنٹ پیکج کمیٹی بنائی, اور لکیلی میں اور فوزیہ وقار اس کمیٹی کے ممبر تھے. اور جب ہم نے وہاں پہ اس ایشو کو, جب انہوں نے کہا کہ ہم عورتوں کے لیے کیا کیا جائے, تو وہاں پہ جب وائلنس کی بات آئی تو ہم نے کہا کہ یہ جو 2 ایشو ہیں کم عمری کی شادی کا اور یہ جو وراثت کا ہے, یہ ہر گھر کا ایشو ہے اور ہر عورت کے ساتھ جڑا ہوا ہے اور ہر مرد کے ساتھ جڑا ہوا ہے. یہ دونوں کام ہر انسان کی زندگی میں ہونے ہوتے ہیں یا آ رہے ہوتے ہیں یا کرنے پڑتے ہیں. تو ہمیں جو ہے جو پاکستان میں وائلنس اگینسٹ وومن کی جو بڑھتی ہوئی جو وجوہات ہیں, ان میں سے یہ 2 ایلیمنٹس جو ہیں کہ ہمارے ہاں جو نکاح جو کم عمری کی شادیاں ہیں اور اس کی وجہ سے جو وائلنس اور جو ایشوز بڑھتے جا رہے ہیں, اور دوسرا جو وراثت کی وجہ سے جو ہم دیکھتے ہیں کہ وراثت نہ ملنے کی وجہ سے جو ہمارے ہاں فیملیز میں وائلنس ہے, اس کو ہمیں ضرور ایڈریس کرنا ہے. تو اس پہ اس کے لیے جو انیشیٹو لیے PCSW نے وہ ڈیفینیٹلی بہت اچھے ہیں, لیکن مجھے ابھی بھی لگتا ہے کہ ہمیں 2-3 چیزیں جو ہیں, چونکہ ٹائم بھی کم ہے تو ہمیں ضرور کرنی چاہیے. بہت اچھی ریکمنڈیشنس ہیں, لیکن مجھے لگتا ہے کہ ہمارے ہاں جو نکاح کا جو 16 سال کی عمر میں پنجاب میں شادی ہو جاتی ہے بچی کی, تو ہمارے ہاں بے فام بھی رجسٹرڈ بے فام ہی نہیں بنتے بچیوں کے. تو اس ایشو کو ایڈریس کرنے کے ساتھ ساتھ ہمیں ایجوکیشن سسٹم میں ہمارے بچے جو ہے میٹرک تک, چونکہ ہمارے ہاں 5 سے 16 سال کی بچی کی ہر بچے کے لیے تعلیم لازمی ہے, تو ہمیں کہیں اپنے کیریکولم میں جو ہے نکاح فارم کو جو ہے ضرور ڈال دینا چاہیے, تاکہ ہمارے بچے اور بچیاں جو کم از کم اسکول ایجوکیشن والے ہیں وہ تو اپنا پڑھ کے جائیں اور کسی وقت وہ پریکٹس کریں اپنے اسکولوں میں, اور جب ان کے پاس یہ زندگی میں موقع آتا ہے تو وہ اس کو فل کریں. دوسرا جو ایشو ہے وہ ہمارے ہاں جو ابھی کیٹ نے اس اسٹڈی میں بھی بتایا کہ نکاح خواہ اور ہے, نکاح رجسٹرار ہو رہے ہیں. اس کو بھی ہمیں جو ہے دیکھنے کی ضرورت ہے پولیٹیکلی بھی اور لیگلی بھی, کہ نکاح رجسٹرار جو ہے اس کی ایجوکیشن جو ہے وہ بہت ضروری ہے, اور اس نکاح کے اندر جو ہے وہ جو تمام ڈاکومنٹیشن لگنا ہوتی ہے, جیسے ہمارے ہاں ڈاوری کا جہیز کی لسٹیں دے دیتے ہیں, حالانکہ ہاں دوسری طرف سے ڈاوری ہمارے ہاں انلیگل ہے یا بہت کم لمٹ میں ہے. تو یہ جو اس کے نکاح فارم کے ساتھ ڈاکومنٹیشن ہے, اس کو بھی ہمیں مینڈیٹری کرنے کی ضرورت ہے کہ اگر کوئی گفٹ دیے جاتے ہیں بچیوں کو, خواتین کو, اور جب خدا نہ خواستہ ان کا بریک اپ ہوتا ہے یا فیملی پرابلمز آتے ہیں, اب جب وہ کورٹ میں جاتی ہیں تو ان کے پاس کوئی ایویڈنس نہیں ہوتا, کیونکہ نکاح اس PCSW کے اس انیشیٹو کے بعد کے نکاح خواہ کی ٹریننگز ہو گئی ہیں اب, لیکن ابھی بھی ہم نے دیکھا ہے کہ ڈاکومنٹیشن کمپلیٹ نہیں ہوتی ہے, اور ڈاکومنٹیشن کمپلیٹ ہونے کے ساتھ ساتھ ڈاکومنٹس جو ساتھ نہیں لگے ہوتے, تو اس وقت جو ہے جو عدالتوں پہ برڈن بڑھتا ہے, جو ججز کو فیصلہ کرنے میں مشکلات آتی ہیں, اور جو خواتین ہیں ان کو کورٹ کے اندر جو ایویڈنس دینے میں مشکلات آتی ہیں. تو اس ایشو کو بھی ایڈریس ہمیں ضرور کرنا چاہیے. تیسرا کہ ہمارے ہاں یہ پرسنل ایشو تو ہے, لیکن یہ پولیٹیکل ایشو بھی ہے. اس میں پولیٹیکلی کہ جو ہمارے ہاں لوکل گورنمنٹ سسٹم جو کہ ابھی نئے لاز بن رہے ہیں, تو وہی صاحب یہاں موجود ہیں, آپ سب ساتھی بھی موجود ہیں, کیٹ ہیں اور سول سوسائٹی یہاں موجود ہے. تو لوکل گورنمنٹ سسٹم کے اندر جو ہے کوئی اس طرح کی جو یونین کونسل لیول پہ جو پہلے انہوں نے مسالتی انجمنیں بنائی تھیں, اب پھر اس کو پنچایت اور مسالتی انجمنوں کی طرف لے کے جا رہے ہیں. ایک تو ہم اس کو ڈسکریج کرتے ہیں, دوسرا ایک فارمل سسٹم لے کے آئیں یونین کونسل کی سطح پہ, تاکہ وہاں پہ جو خواتین ہیں وہ یونین کونسل سطح پہ ان کو لیگل ایڈوائس بھی ملے, لیگل کاؤنسلنگ بھی ملے, اور ان کی ایکسیس میں بھی ہو. اور وہاں پہ ہی یہ سارے ایشوز جو ہیں ڈسٹرکٹ یونین کونسل لیول پہ ہمیں ایڈریس کرنے کی ضرورت ہے. اور یہ جو پولیٹیکل ول جو ہے اس کے لیے ہمیں ایڈوکیسی اور کرنے کی ضرورت ہے, پولیٹیکل ول کو انکریز کرنے کی ضرورت ہے, تاکہ ہمارے ہاں یہ جو گراس روٹ لیول پہ اویئرنیس بھی ہو اور عدالتوں کا بوجھ بھی کم ہو, اور دوسرا فارمل سسٹم کی طرف بھی ہم جو ہے وہ جائیں. تو بہت شکریہ. اس کے ساتھ ساتھ جو بے فام کا جو اس میں جو ہم نے ایک اور فائنڈنگ جو ہمارے کام کرتے ہوئے آئی, وہ یہ کہ اس میں جو طلاق کا حق عورتوں کو دیا جاتا ہے, وہ مائنڈ سیٹ جو ہے نا وہ ابھی بھی ہمارے ہاں موجود, اس कानूनी तौर पे इस निकाह अफवाह में मौजूद है, लेकिन हमारे यहाँ भी अभी हमारी पढ़ी लिखी फैमिलीज़ में भी जब इस शिक पे आते हैं तो निकाह खां जो है ना अभी भी उस पर डरता है, अभी भी उसको फिल नहीं कर रहा, अभी भी उसको क्रॉस करता है, जबकि इस्लाम भी दे रहा है, मज़हब भी दे रहा है और लीगली वो बाउंड भी है निकाह खां, लेकिन हमारे यहाँ जो माइंड सेट है उसकी वजह से ये जो चीज़ें हैं वो अभी भी एड्रेस नहीं हो रही। तो ये पॉसिबल होगा जब हम इसको अपने कैरिकुलम में लेके आएंगे और सेंसिटाइजेशन और ट्रेनिंग कैंपेन करेंगे, और जो अभी इतनी अच्छी ट्रेनिंग प्रोग्राम फील्ड में हमने देखा निकाह खां का, उसका फॉलोअप भी नहीं, उसके लिए ज़रूरत है कोऑर्डिनेशन की। अब PCSW मौजूद है, वुमेन डेवलपमेंट डिपार्टमेंट मौजूद है, लोकल गवर्नमेंट डिपार्टमेंट मौजूद है, तो ये जो चीज़ें हैं ये हमें एक तरफ से सिविल सोसाइटी ने पुश करनी है, दूसरी तरफ से जो इंस्टीट्यूशन है PCSW जैसे इंस्टीट्यूशन जिनको हमने बनाया है इनको भी पुश करने की ज़रूरत है कि ये इसकी जो स्कीम्स बनवाएं और ADB में जो है इनको लेके आएँ ताकि जो एक अच्छा काम शुरू हुआ है उसको कंटिन्यू किया जाए। बहुत शुक्रिया।
So if I may ask you, Walida ji, I do. So what would you recommend that the government do in the future to extend and regularize training for the requirements for marriage licenses?
Thank you very much. First of all, I'll comment as Mumtaz Mughal has said that there is need to strengthen the institution which are already working for public and particularly Punjab Commission on the Status of Women, Women Protection Authority. They haven't ruled so far. They haven't structured, they haven't board of directors since 2018. But the things are, most of things are against the government, so I don't like to speak more on it. Now the second thing is, Mumtaz Mughal has mentioned a lot of things, particularly to cover the awareness component, advocacy in this area. Definitely it should be. But let me say some things which should be added for policy making and should be prioritized for amendments in Local Government Act. First of all, there must be an eligibility criteria to issue the license. For example, there's need to define what should be the eligibility criteria. There must be a qualification. There must be an age bracket. It doesn't mean upper age bracket should not be given. This should be. For example, I have a case and physical criteria as well. For example, I'll give you an example in Kasur. During the training, I was there to monitoring my, I was serving as a PD of this project and my manager was there, trainers were there. But what we have seen, there was a registrar who was blind. And his grandson was practicing the parts which were assigned to him by local government. And the license was issued in 1980. So this is only, there are a lot of examples. We have submitted about 37 to 38 recommendations to local government to do, to act, to proceed in certain areas. And secondly, I'd like to explain the filling of nikah nama issue. During training, what the feedback of the participant were, actually it differs with the complaints which we are receiving nowadays through Prime Minister portal, through 1043, through Chief Minister portal and walk-in complaints. So what the difference is? As you have mentioned, it's really good that nikah registrar and nikah khan, they are both different person. For example, any person can take the consent. He or she will be the nikah khan. The registrar, the person who has who has license which is issued by the local government. He is the registrar. So where the issue is, the commitment, a lot of commitments before the parents and before the girl are made during this signing of agreement. So all those commitments are not written by the registrar. So at that time, in often cases, we see he is sitting in the union council, He is sitting in his house and he is not aware what the package has been finalized between boy family and the girl family. So things are not written, which on other way we people say, वो cross लगा देते हैं. We simply say, just because. So what the rule should be, the registrar should be available at the time of nikah with the all other rest of witnesses, and he should sign himself under the supervision and whatever the, for example, nikah can be a Mr. Tahir al-Qadri, I can be a nikah khan, but I am not a registrar. So things should be materialized in this way. For now, the next point which I want to say, that is what I am facing, and I am receiving lot of complaints. Those are the weak implementation of Gift Act 1976. If the thing, because the woman, the girl is saying they have committed, we will give you 3 acres. For example, 24 canal land, and it's not written in, but it was promised. And if it is not written in the nikah nama, so how she will, the Muslim family law will not be, cannot be applied on her. So she can, even from civil courts, even for gender, GBV courts, even from any court she can get it. So a woman should also be vocal and be vigilant at the time of this agreement. She should see the commitments are being written on that very paper or not. That's called agreement. Let me come to the next. We have also recommended that there must be B form at the time of this agreement. Though we all are trying, we are working with the civil society, PCSW is working with the civil society, and civil society is really supporting in this regard, and they have proceeded, particularly Aurat Foundation, Shirkat Ka, and many more. So the age should be 18 years. But in case, though there is a judgment of Islamabad High Court as well, but till the time it's the amendments or the things are not matured, so B form should be compulsory. It should be notified by the local government. We can't intervene. We can support technically to the local government. So it was said to us, it's your mistake. Why you people added this came in your annual plan? It is the purview of local government. So there is again separate debate. Now, if how much gold has been given as a gift to the girl, so it should be mentioned. And now the main point, Nadra is working on it, and it's a recent update from the local government. They are shifting this registration process on tab now. So soon we will see that the nikah nama is going to be registered on spot on tab. So what are the issue? Issue is we will the bride will receive all the rights, which will be thumb impression will be there on the tab. But let's see, it will take time. We all are waiting how it will be actualized, and operational dimension rules are still. Now, I would like to explain one more thing, and that is property. Other than these rights, I want to comment on the legal rights of the woman, as you have mentioned in your. That's when we see the woman protection, and there is a woman protection authority, and they are not implementing the same law in the Punjab. So it's only being implemented in Multan and Walk Center. You all are well aware as compared to me. You know what's going on. It's really a beautiful model. But they should be empowered in this way, where the inspector, lady inspector, the sitting there, she should have right to launch an FIR. She can launch an FIR. So though it's really a good model, psychologist there, psychosocial support, and medical legal staff is also there, and the presiding officer serving as a judge is also there to hear the case and immediately direct the bailiff to take the protective custody or to arrest anybody. So this is a really good model, but need to strengthen it, and also to establish such a walk center in all the districts of Punjab, not only in Multan. Though even after such struggles of civil society, now they are working in Multan and Pindi and like that. They have also an idea to expand and convert Darul Amans into walk center as well. So we wish they may proceed this way and give the right and justice to women particularly. Next, it should be Fair Representation Act. That's the 33% representation statutory bodies board. The act says there's a list attached with the act. It only applies on 66 bodies. Why only 66 bodies? So it should be applied across the Punjab, even the bodies and the committees, statutory commission, whatever the structure committees are. There should be 33% representation at deputy commissioner level, at district level, at divisional level. The commissioner are making certain bodies, boards. So there must be 33% representation. Now there's need an amendment in this regard. Secondly, I appreciate, but still need to implement the amendment recently has made in amendment Harassment at Workplace Act. But there are also a lot of issues. मसलन कल साहिवाल के केस में एक लड़की की सैलरी नहीं दी थी तो वो उससे बदतमीज़ी हुई and she was harassed. And then we requested to the management of that very university, and DPO was requested to intervene in this case. So they have provided the salary as well, and then just arbitration was it, and they simply excused and written apologies, and now it has been resolved. But this is not the solution. Things should be, handled on merit, like the women, like the men are availing the opportunities and doing all the things in really independent way in the society. Similarly, women should also have.
Thank you.
And we are striving for it, and we can only achieve the results by adopting an integrated approach with the civil society organization, with the donor agency, and no doubt the rest of public sector organization who are working on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Sorry for much time.
Thank you. That was very useful. Thank you. If I may call on Ms. Khabar Mumtaz, please. Madam, could I ask you to please discuss what kind of interventions you think can help break the taboo for families to discuss the terms of marriage contracts frankly and openly in advance?
I think it's very important that men be approached also. We talked about, reaching out to men in families for electoral purposes. I think we need to reach out to men also on the issue of marriage contract, and many civil society organizations have done that, but their field of operation is always, it's small compared to the scale that you want, and there has been impact on that. So I think it's, first of all, the training of Nikah Khwans in Punjab was extremely an important intervention, and I agree that there should be a refresher provision also for licensed, and there should be a minimal educational level training as proposed by Kate in her presentation, but also a refresher for Nikah Khwans and Nikah Registrars. I think it's very important that Nikah Khwan and Nikah Registrar have a before a wedding takes place, have an interaction, so that the Nikah Registrar is the one who's registering the marriage. He should also be able to inform the Nikah Khwan, because very often a Nikah Khwan can be somebody from the family who may not know the details of the Nikah Nama and the requirements of the law. So it would be useful to have that, and really a lot of the responsibility should be given to the local government, because this is something happening in communities. So local government councillors, women councillors, male councillors, those are the people who can be mobilized at the community level to ensure that the law is followed, because now under the law in Punjab, you can't leave blank columns. You have to fill the columns. So all that has to be implemented. So I do think that many civil society organizations are working on this issue, but we need the push of the government to make sure that it happens. And on the other thing is that we need to continue the campaign of minimum age of marriage of 18 for girls. Because to expect a girl of 16 or 15 or even 18 to know what a nikah entails is a tall order, especially if she's not even educated. So I think I do feel that when we are proposing policies, we have to look at the other dimensions that impact on the implementation of the policy. And therefore, it's important. Mumtaz has talked about introducing the nikah in the schools, but it's very important because decisions are not taken by that 16-year-old or even an 18-year-old. This is sharing something about myself. I got married at 22. I didn't see the nikah the details. I just signed it. So I'm educated, masters with very educated parents. Half the nikah was empty. So I think there has to be an awareness and campaigns on TV, on the kind of campaigns that are run for elections. We do need that. And it is very important. The CNIC to prove that a girl is 18, marriage at the age of 18, nikah registrar to be as much trained as a nikah khwan. So, and very often in Punjab, nikah khwan and registrar are often the same person also, especially in rural areas. So, something that can be carried on from where the PCSW left. Unfortunately, PCSW is without a chair or members for the last 3 years. So, what to comment?
Thank you. And Kate also raised this norm where if families are very reluctant, families of girls are very reluctant to enter into negotiation or secure the rights of women. And what do you think can be done to change that norm, to normalize negotiation in the way that other Muslim countries are doing?
Can I just enter here? The point is that there are negotiations on dowry between the families. They're not public negotiations, but there are negotiations. Because you don't want at the last minute, at the time of the signing of the nikah, people arguing, the families arguing about it. So there are informal negotiations, and that is actually firmed up beforehand. The important thing is that it's not entered into the nikah, therefore it becomes non-binding. So the issue is that should be reflected in the nikah. I know, I've seen many marriages where there's even a discussion in some parts of Punjab, South Punjab, that they say that there will be, the meher will be given at the time of the marriage, and the girl's family then asks the girl to return it to the boy. So there are many customs that come in the way, and we have to be crossing those taboos and those customs.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Samia, if I may ask you to also comment on this question, please.
Actually, I would like to comment on the other research paper that Kate talked about, which is on land distribution and inheritance rights. So, from the field, when we informally go and talk to the women in the field about sort of inheritance and whether they know their rights or, how does it work in their families, we find that women tell us that they're basically socialized from a very young age to not claim their inheritance. Especially when it comes to land. And the whole sort of socialization process is really very much focused on the fact that this will destroy the fabric of the family and this will create a lot of conflict and tension. And so women will be supported through other ways. And therefore, at the time, of the inheritance, at the time of the death of the, head of the family or head of the household or whatever, that they shouldn't put in a claim. And given that social sort of construct, they don't claim. They feel that it's better to protect the family. So for the sake of the family, that they should give up their inheritance rights. And so this makes it very interesting, right? That now in Punjab, if you have this kind of a transparent, digitized land distribution system, registration system. So when it comes to inheritance, and when it comes to the time of who is there, who is eligible to inherit the land, I wonder, Kate, if there is something, in your research, what you're looking at in terms of the of women sort of actually saying that at the time, saying that no, we don't want the land, so please give it to our brothers. So I think, it would be interesting to see those markers, or to identify that what percentage of women are basically voluntarily just handing over that inheritance right to the other male members of their family, because I think there is probably that happens a lot. And I also feel that, this land distribution, it's actually it's a zero-sum game, right? It's not, there is no mutual benefit. It is a divided benefit. So if you're losing, someone else is gaining. And for men, to lose that control over the land, it is an economic loss. It is a loss of power and control. So there is, I think, going to be a lot of pushback in terms of trying to create then other ways through the system, even though there is digitization and transparency, to ensure that the inheritance, that the registration of land kind of remains within their purview and within their control. And I don't know, and I'm sure you do, because you do some fantastic research. So I'm sure you're looking at the more nuanced approaches in terms of how does this land distribution actually work out in the longer term. You've looked at some of these interesting sort of results that you found, or evidence about women or about girls, they're not being being married earlier than they normally would, and other things. So I think maybe do you have, this is a question I'm putting back to you, is that are there other sort of markers that you are looking at in terms of what is happening within this area? Thank you.
Yeah, I strongly agree with everything you said, Samia. I think that you really more clearly explained some of the issues that come up in terms of female land inheritance as an area of expansion of women's rights, because division of land is a zero-sum game. And just to expand on what you said, I guess two things. There's a lot of previous research, the qualitative research, that really sort of supports this idea that women are, when they claim their share of the land, it's kind of a trade-off between that and other support they might get from their natal family. So you're choosing to take the land and give up on future support from that network, which is obviously a really costly thing. I don't think that this is a simple issue to solve at all. It's all tied in with the underlying system in which women go, and when they get married, go into the household of their husband and their in-laws. Because if they move, so if you have access to future use of agricultural land, but you've then moved somewhere else, you don't have access to it between the day that you get married and the day that your parents pass away and the inheritance process completes. You don't functionally have kind of access to that. You can imagine that being resolved. For example, maybe you can rent it to your brothers or something of that sort, but there's a lot of things that make that more difficult in practice. So I think a lot of the unintended consequences that we're seeing in terms of marriage outcomes, women getting married earlier and without consent, those are kind of, those are sort of reactions that we see that mean that it's not unambiguously a positive thing. In some way, it's a really good thing if women have better access to their inheritance rights, but there's other decisions that are all related to marriage and related to investment in human capital that are all tied in with it. So I don't think it's an easy puzzle to solve at all. I think that I guess that's why in that slide, the main policy implication I think that we see is that it's damaging that there's uncertainty about it, because you can kind of lose both ways. Like if you lose, you on the day, and the time your marriage is getting negotiated and the dowry is getting negotiated, maybe you're getting less dowry because the family anticipates that in the future you might inherit land. But maybe you lose out on the dowry and get a worse marriage match, and also then later you don't get the land. So it can end up, because there's this lack of clarity about what's going to happen, it ends up being you can lose on both sides, and that's one of the reasons why I think I would suggest that trying to reduce the uncertainty in the process is the main way that it can be improved.
Thank you. I have a request. I was expecting one person from local government here to comment in different area, because a lot of things which we are discussing that this responsibility relates to local government. So there should be one officer in such discussions from local government, so he or she may address on the relevant area. Secondly, let me tell to the participants and the people who have joined us online, total with the data we have received from local government, it's about 40,000, 39,000 something nikah registrars are there in Punjab. So out of them we have trained about 24,000 nikah registrar, inclusive some UC secretaries, about 300 to 400. And now the one thing, the 2 points which I want to discuss, there are 3 laws for property rights of women. Number 1, Land Revenue Act 2012, second, Immovable Property Right Act 1967, and now the recent Enforcement of Property Rights of Women Act 2021. So this is the latest act. The issue is what we have what we have reviewed the thing, then what we have come to know. Some of them, the executing body's deputy commissioner, he has powers. Some of them are for the ombudsperson, but the decision taken by the ombudsman somehow it's the deputy commissioner's power and his will is, they are not willing, they are not actually agreed with the decision taken under the Act 2021. So there's need to constitute a committee, particularly civil society should lead in this regard, and we will be definitely there. And how within short time we can give the inheritance property rights to the woman. Though the Land Revenue Act in the clause 35A really support, and it's written that within the 2 months they have to transfer the property, but practically हमें ऐसा नज़र नहीं आता. Now, second thing, what I want to say, 3 laws are there, but the execution hurdle, they are clashing somewhere each other. Now, the next point which I want to, from your discussion I have taken, the second marriage and third marriage, how we can come to know. If we will come towards the digitization of this record, then we can only come to the he or she is he has second marriage, he has third marriage. So when the Nadra has already been requested to support local government in this regard, and if we people start to digitize this process, the nikah registration process, then immediately on a click, when you will submit your data, put on the tab or somewhere, then immediately they will tell you, oh, he's already married with Falan. He's already married with Falan. So we have to, this is my recommendation, and I have already submitted to the local government, and this forum should also cater these things in their report or recommendation, whatever you will produce of this session. Thank you.
I think very good suggestion. This will lead also the deprivation of the inheritance rights to the other family members. एक और जो इशू हमें नज़र आता है इस सारे में कि अब हमें ज़्यादा इस पे जो है 2-3 लेवल पे काम करने की ज़रूरत है. एक तो जैसे खावर आपने कहा कि ہمیں اویئرنیس کی زیادہ ضرورت ہے. ابھی بھی ہمارے ہاں جو اسٹڈی ہمیں بتاتی ہے کہ 22% خواتین کے پاس جو ہے وہ انہیریٹنس رائٹ کو لیتی ہیں, اور ہم نے یہ بھی دیکھا ہے کہ خواتین کے نام پہ پراپرٹیاں ہوتی ہیں, لیکن ان کے پاس نہ تو نکاح نامہ ہوتا ہے, نہ CNIC ہوتا ہے, نہ ATM کارڈ ہوتا ہے, اور وراثت کے کاغذات تو اس کے ہاتھ میں ہوتے ہی نہیں ہیں. تو یہ ساری چیزیں اس کانٹیکسٹ میں ہمیں جو اویئرنیس کا کام ہے وہ ہمیں زیادہ کرنے کی ضرورت ہے, کہ خواتین کو کی جو آئیڈینٹی ہے, ان کے جو یہ بیسک ڈاکومنٹس ہیں وہ ان کے پاس ہونے چاہیے اس طرح. اور دوسرا جو ایشو ہے وہ پولیٹیکل ول کا ہے, جس کے لیے جو ہے ہمیں ان ڈپارٹمنٹس کو اور ہم سب کو مل کے جو ہے زیادہ کوشش کرنے کی ضرورت ہے, کیونکہ جب تک پولیٹیکل ول نہیں ہوگی, آپ لاز بناتے رہیں, 3-4 لاز بنے ہوئے ہیں پنجاب میں, انہیریٹنس کا پروسیس بہت اچھا ڈیفائن کیا ہوا ہے, ڈسٹرکٹ لیول پہ کمیٹیاں موجود ہیں انہیریٹنس کو ایڈریس کو, لیکن اس کا ایک اور بھی ہم نے دیکھا ہے اپنے علاقوں میں کام کرتے ہوئے, جب ہم لوگوں کو بتا رہے ہوتے ہیں کہ پنجاب میں جو ہے اگر گھر کا سربراہ فوت ہو جاتا ہے, جیسے ہی ڈیتھ سرٹیفکیٹ رجسٹرڈ ہوگا تو آپ کے ہاں جو ہے نوٹس آ جائے گا کہ وراثت کو تقسیم کریں. تو اب ہم نے یہ بھی دیکھا کہ ایک ٹرینڈ چینج ہونے لگا کہ اس اویئرنیس کے ساتھ ساتھ والدین جو ہے نا وہ اپنی زندگی میں کوشش کر رہے ہیں کہ اپنے بیٹوں کے نام پہ جو پراپرٹیاں دینی ہیں وہ دے دیں, ہم بیٹیوں کو ادھر سے ڈپرائیو کرنے کے والے سے. یہ بھی ہم نے کچھ فیملیز میں دیکھا, اس ٹرینڈ کو بھی دیکھا, لیکن جو زیادہ ضرورت ہے وہ یہ کہ ہمیں اس طرح جو ڈپارٹمنٹل پروونشل لیول پہ جو ڈپارٹمنٹس ہیں ان کی کوآرڈینیشن کو اسٹرینتھن کرنے کی, جیسے وہی صاحب نے خود بھی آئیڈینٹیفائی کیا, وہاں پہ بھی ضرورت ہے, اور اس کو مین اسٹریم کرنے کی بھی ضرورت ہے, اور ان کی بجٹری ایلوکیشن کرنے کی ضرورت ہے, تاکہ یہ جو کام ہے جو ہمارے ہاں جو ہم آدھی آبادی کو وائلنس میں رکھتے ہیں ان کے, اور ان وجوہات کی بنیاد پہ رکھتے ہیں کہ یہ جو بیسک ہمارے جو ایشو ہیں کہ نکاح کے بچیوں کی چوائس کا نہ پوچھنا, جس کے بارے میں سب کو پتہ ہے کہ قرآن پاک میں لکھا ہوا ہے کہ آپ جب شادی کرتے ہیں تو پوچھیں, اور آپ ایک جو ہے بچی کو جو کہ 18 سال کی عمر کی بھی نہیں ہے اس کی شادی کرتے ہیں, اسے پوچھنے کی بھی زحمت گوارا نہیں کرتے. تو اگر ہمیں یہ ایشوز جو ہیں وہ ڈیل کرنے ہیں تو ہمیں جو ہے پولیٹیکل ول کو زیادہ بڑھوانا پڑے گا, زیادہ ہمیں پوش کرنا پڑے گا گورنمنٹس کو کہ وہ بجٹری ایلوکیشن مسلسل رکھیں, اور جو ہمارے انسٹیٹیوشن جو ہم نے بنائے ہیں, PCSW ہے, امبرس پرسن آفس ہے, یا اور مانیٹرنگ میکانزم ہے, لوکل گورنمنٹ اس کا بہت بڑا رول ہے. جب تک لوکل گورنمنٹ امپلیمنٹ نہیں ہوگا گراس روٹ لیول تک, ہمارے یہ ایشو مجھے نہیں لگتا کہ کہیں پہ ایڈریس ہو سکیں گے. تو پولیٹیکل اور سوشل اور پرسنل ایشو جو ہیں وہ سارے ایک دوسرے کے ساتھ لنک ہیں. بہت شکریہ ڈاکٹر کیٹ.
I'm not sorry you had to have your hand up for a really long time. Could I request you to please ask your question and also invite people on the floor to think of their questions, please?
Thank you. No, I've been listening to the conversation and presentations with great interest, and it's a really enriching and important discussion. So thank you to all the panelists for raising these issues and helping us to think through the various kind of solutions and problems. I think there were some kind of comments and also a question I had. A question I had with regards to the nikah nama and the question of the nikah registrars, and I don't know whether this is wishful thinking on my part with regards to legislation within Pakistan, but to what extent do we have, can women perform the nikah as well? And if so, do we have any numbers in terms of how many women are there who are doing this in Pakistan? I think it's a really important thing for women to have some kind of role modeling in that question. The other question about registration of marriages. Now there is, I've had interactions with women in the diaspora, especially coming from Pakistan, and this is also an issue in the UK with regards to nikahs and civil marriages. So if you don't register your marriage over here in sort of through the civil service ceremony, you only have a nikah, you have no inheritance rights, you're not able to access anything. A lot of women in Pakistan are married or married off, especially in the aspirational kind of movement across class from working class background to or a lower middle class background, to get sort of, especially women are in that vulnerable position where they are brought into certain marriages in the UK, and they then come here and they have the nikah nama, and they believe that they will be able to access all sorts of rights on the basis of that marriage agreement, and they don't. And this is also a huge issue, which affects women living in Pakistan and then making the migration and then migrating back. So that's kind of a question I had, and I was wondering what sort of work is being done on that, and that we really need to do something about that, because those women are totally, I feel they're totally abandoned in that whole process, and then become completely dependent on the family to be able to bail them out of situations that the family is not able to, because the family itself is looking to get out of that situation. And I suppose the other question was, we're talking about the education of women with regards to their empowerment and land access and land rights. To what extent are we also talking about, and I'm sort of probably saying something that's already being done, but to what extent, is this a kind of relational question? It's an intersectional question. You can educate the women, but if we don't educate the men, how will we get there? So it's got to be done in partnership, doesn't it? And I wondered what the sort of panelists thought in regards of their work and their research. I know that the work is very rich that's done on it. So these were just kind of some thoughts and questions that I had that I wanted to put across and share.
Thank you, Amna. So, Kate, just before we get into it, Ms. Khabar Mumtaz has to leave. So, Khabar Mumtaz Saiba, may I invite you to please comment on that first, if you have time at all?
I just wanted to share the fact that, about women performing nikahs, there's nothing to stop them. And I know that Asma Jahangir performed nikahs of a number of friends' children. So it's not, the issue is that nikah can be performed by anyone. If you have the witnesses and consent from the man and the woman, it's a question of registration. So it is not spelled out in our registrars, the law or the rules, that a woman can't be a registrar. So I think that's where we need to push for women registrars of nikah nama, trained women's registrars. That would, I think, have an impact. So that's the only point I wanted to make. I'm sorry I have to leave, but this has been a very interesting and useful session. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I invite Wahid Saab, you had a response to the question. Or maybe not, perhaps I misunderstood. Oh, I see. Okay, I misunderstood.
But I want to say one thing. Discussing with Mumtaz Mughal, that there is need to renew the lessons every year. If we have to get a lot of challenges, then there's need to renew that very lessons every year. And we can resolve lot of matters, lot of cases, lot of complaints through this process if we renew every year. Because the previous practices, once issued, the lessons has been issued, now till the life. And nobody is telling them the person is still alive or not. I mean, the registrar is there on earth or not. So there is need. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I think we're running short on time, but I think this has been a fantastic discussion. I think just to quickly add, as far as women registering marriages, so I think I briefly alluded to this in the presentation, but so before this initiative, the first one that I talked about on marriage registrars, the government of Punjab did not have a list of all of the marriage registrars in the province. It did not exist. And so they had the implementing teams had to do this huge exercise of getting every union council to report who are the registrars that have licenses. And as you said, a lot of those licenses were issued a very long time ago, so even that was very difficult for them to keep track of. So generating this list, I think, was a contribution of the project as well. And when that list was compiled of these 40,000 registrars, all of them were male. So I think this is another example of one of many things that by official rules there may not be a rule against it, but in practice it's not happening, at least in Punjab, that the registrars are female. But as several people have mentioned, that anybody can act as the nikah khwan. It doesn't have to be a man or a woman, it doesn't have to be an imam. It can be done by anyone who's in a position to just ask the couple if they consent. So that is something that would be an interesting idea for potential piloting and experimentation as well. And then as far as non-registration, I'm not familiar at all with the issue that you mentioned about the diaspora. That does seem like a really important issue. I think that there are people not registering marriages here, but I don't think we have good data on how many, and that the lack of registration of the marriage is something legally it is supposed to be registered. So lack of registration is something that is sort of punishable for the nikah khwan, and so that was a focus of the marriage registrar training, but it hasn't been as big of a focus in our study.
Are there any questions from the floor?
So I was wondering about the training for nikah registrars. Is there a specific clause or part of the training where registrars are not supposed to give their opinion about things like the right to divorce? Because anecdotally speaking, many friends have experienced this, that registrars will tell about the rights, they will not cross out the section, but they will give their personal opinions to the family about right to divorce or how much haq mehr they should give. We also know that social disapproval from any sort of authority does play a role in the negotiation process. So I was just wondering about that. Are there any? Is it part of the training that the registrar is not supposed to give their personal opinions about these issues?
Yeah, it was part of it, but issues are on both sides. Number one, it's a patriarchal society, and what the will is of a father, of a brother has. So they actually want to, not give the property to her daughter, and they convey to the registrar as per their will what they have already thought. So they convey those information to write in it. So we have to break this cultural barrier, number one. Number two, the things in our manual prepared for the nikah registrar, or the things are already in it. Muslim family laws, what the practice and hands-on exercise to fill the nikah nama during the workshops. So the things are already in our training manual. Third thing, again, I'll request, before it I have already said, we can control lot of things by online registration, by making it possible to shift it to online registration process. We can handle a lot of things. For example, we will have the qualified nikah registrar if we will shift this process to online registration proper. Definitely, if जो अनपढ़ आदमी है वो तो online fill ही नहीं कर पाएगा, पहले ही बात ये. The second thing is you can come to know the person already married, it is his second marriage or third marriage. Third one is you can, we as a society can solve early age marriage issue. During the registration process, we can come to know, ये तो इसकी age ही बड़ी थोड़ी है. The third one, but the issue, then the property right issue, as Mumtaz has already said, we can also solve, because nowadays what we are receiving the complaints, and they said, "Hamara to nikah hi nahi hua." So then, when we will have such data, and NADRA will maintain that very repository, then that repository will ultimately show that Fulan person is the husband of this lady. So he has certain rights from the property, from the inheritance property. So land revenue, under Land Revenue Act, under Immovable Property Act, and definitely under the recent act. So the third thing is, as all of us have said, advocacy, awareness, this component is very important, need to sensitize the community.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all the panelists. Thank you, Kate, very much for a very interesting session. Anam, over to you. Thank you so much.
Actually, the floor is back to Kate and Sarah for the closing remarks for our EGEN Workshop 2022. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Talked a lot already and everyone's tired, but we just want to say that while the scope of the EGEN workshop expanded a lot from the last time we did it, when it was only an academic sort of internal work in progress workshop, we're really happy that we've had such a great conversation across researchers and policymakers and implementers today, and we hope to make this an annual event, and so we hope to see you all next year.
Thank you so much. I just want to extend thanks to our host organization, CERP, and partnering ideas, and also the CLEAR initiative. And a personal thanks to the CEO of CERP, Mr. Maroof Sayed, and of Ideas, Ms. Rabia Malik, for being here all day and personally supporting this initiative. There's a team of people from CERP who has worked really tirelessly to make sure that everything runs. I want to thank them by name. Anam Shoaib, Jahara, Amin, Larib Tariq, Amna Tariq, Meher Tibana, Adil Saeed, Amna Akil, Faizan Rashid, Ayaz Khan, Iman Haider, Ghada Qureshi, Lala Rukh Khan, Sidra Shah, and Uzair. Thank you all so much. And finally, a huge thanks to our panelists who have taken out time from their work to engage with ours. We are really appreciative. And to all the participants who've asked wonderful questions and been a really engaged participatory audience. Thank you.